All right, it is 6 o'clock. I will call the February 8th, 2022 meeting of the Wythe County Board of Supervisors to order. This evening, Mr. Terry will offer the invocation. If you would, please rise and remain standing for the pledge.
Let us pray. Lord God, we thank you for this time together, Lord Jesus. Lord, we thank you for these elected members up here that's willing to serve and do the will for the people, Lord God. Lord, we ask for your protection for our state of Virginia. We ask for your protection for the United States of America. And Lord, just continue to watch over all the leaders, both local, state, and national, Lord Jesus. They need you now more than ever. Lord God, we thank you for your Son who died for our sins so we can have eternal life with you, Father. We lift up, we thank you, we pray in your holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I will note for the record, we do have a quorum, and for the first time in 2022, we have everybody here. One minor change on the agenda, we will add a closed session at the end of the meeting for discussion of personnel issues. First item on the agenda, citizens' time. I don't believe we had anybody signed up. Is that correct, Ms. Collins? That being said, I'll close citizens' time and move on to the payment of invoices. Each member's received in their package a copy of the invoices as presented. That being said, I'll open the floor for a motion to pay the invoices.
So moved.
Have a motion by Mr. Smith. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second by Mr. Terry. Is there any questions, discussion, or any invoice that any member would like to pull out? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. We'll start with Mr. Cook.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye. Aye.
So approved. Next item is the minutes of our previous meeting from January the 25th, 2022. Entertain a motion to approve those.
So moved.
Have a motion by Mr. Terry. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second by Mr. Cook. Is there any questions or discussion about the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? They are approved. Moving on to old business, the first item is appointments. Mr. Barrett, do we have anything?
The only thing, don't have anything right now that I know of, right?
Does any member have any appointments to address? Move on from that, our fiscal year 21 audit acceptance.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Stone was here at the last meeting. He gave a good audit report to us, and I failed to ask you all to make a motion to accept the audit that was presented, and I would ask that you all do so at this time.
Entertain a motion to approve the audit as presented.
So moved. Second.
Have a motion by Ms. Lawson, second by Mr. Smith. Is there any questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So accepted. Anything under old business, Mr. Barrett?
No, sir.
Mr. Hankins, do you have anything?
Yes, sir. This is not on the agenda, but it does fall under old business. We told you that we received a grant from the Virginia Department of Health. It's in the amount of $44,862.82 from the Rescue Squad Assistance Fund, and this award is to support the purchase of the necessary technology for the emergency medical dispatch, which we have to have in place to dispatch by the end of 2023, as well as to support training for that system. I would just, we have an award acceptance deadline of February 28th, so we can go ahead and get that here. I would ask that the board accept the grant award from RSAF in the amount of $44,862.82.
Entertain a motion to accept the grant award as Mr. Hankins described.
So moved.
Have a motion by Mr. Horny. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Mr. Burden, sorry. Is there any questions or discussion?
It is an 80-20 grant, so 20% of the funds will come from the county, and that's included in the current operation.
Does that change anybody's motion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Terry?
Aye.
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 Aye. So approved. Anything else, Mr. Hankins?
No, sir.
Moving on to new business. First item is our Lead Mines Rescue Squad annual report. Mr. Cody Jackson.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair. I thank you all for the, and other members, I thank you all for the opportunity to come and speak with you tonight. I apologize for my absence the last meeting. As you can tell, I'm still trying to get back to 100%. But I was a little under the weather, and I didn't want to share that as sharing of a person as I might be. I compiled this report to kind of give you an idea of where we stand for through the year of 2021. As you all know, the past 2 years have been a pretty trying time for all public safety agencies, but I'm happy to report that this report is about progress and growth and not on the despair of what we've faced. If you've seen on the first section of our vital statistics, you saw that our call numbers continue to climb. They have climbed about 110 calls a year since 2019. Thus far for this year, in January alone, we have ran 188, or excuse me, we've been dispatched to 188 calls. We ran 147 of those, and that's more than we were even dispatched for last year. So the numbers speak for themselves. The call volume continues to climb. As you can see, we did have to rely on mutual aid for a lot of our calls, but again, as the call volume increases, that will only continue to be the case. You can see the call types there. I won't go over that. The other piece that I wanted to talk about was, as you can see, our revenue recovery has been very positive. One of the most impactful things that we did was to change billing companies, and by doing so, we've been able to increase our recovery rate significantly from about 40% to 62%. And in fact, from 2020 to 2021, we increased our revenue by about $25,000. So that speaks for itself in what that billing company and that change has made for us. We were fortunate enough to get about $230,000 in grant awards last year. We were actually allotted money to buy 2 cardiac monitors by the board back in late 2019, I guess I should say. We actually took that money as it was awarded and used it to match a grant to buy 3 instead of 2, and we actually added some equipment to be able to upload the data from those monitors directly into our reporting system, so that helped our billing process as well. So I think that also is a factor in the increased revenue that we were able to see. As we move forward, you see that we've started the construction. If you went by, you see the construction has started on our building. Hopefully, they will have that done in the next few months. Everybody is very excited about that, and we're very grateful to the board for the funds to be able to complete that project. The rock boat, I think Mr. Hankins has been working with Chuck and the others on getting that done, and we're happy that we're able to expand our services to be able to provide rescue services in a more safer manner with that new piece of equipment. We're still waiting for our ambulance that we granted for 2 cycles ago, but it is in progress. This was one of the last pictures that came from the factory. They anticipate it being completed and ready for our inspection, hopefully by the end of April. And last but not least, of course, I just want to say that we're thankful for all the folks at Lead Mines that come in day to day despite the challenges that we faced in the past 2 years. It's been a very trying time for everyone, and the folks at Lead Mines, it's been no different. But I'm thankful to say that we have been able to continue forward and progress. One point that I did not include in this report, but I feel like is very telling to the progress that we've made, is that we were deemed ineligible for provider relief funds from the government because we were able to mitigate losses through strategic planning and expense management. So we didn't qualify for those things, and at the face value, you'd think, well, that's not good, that's free money we could have gotten, but actually I think is a testament to the lean efficiency that we've utilized in the past 2 years during this pandemic to try to ensure our viability. Any questions from anybody?
Anybody have any questions?
No questions.
I'd like to at least, the 62% recovery rate is a good recovery rate for our area. Pleased with their work on that.
Our board meetings are the third Tuesday of the month, so if anybody is interested, or I know Mr. Smith and Mr. McRoberts, they usually came to those, but if you all are inclined and would like to come, we'll be glad to have you. So thank you all for your time.
Cody, one thing, on your, you were talking about relying on mutual aid. Do you look for that to change once you get the expanded station down there? Is that a goal?
Yes, that is a goal. Once we have the ability and the space to accommodate those folks, I have been in conversations with Mr. McCabe and Mr. Hankins about staffing models and strategies to be able to, add additional crews to be able to meet the call volume. One of the things that we, of course, we are very excited about Blue Star, but at the same time, we realize that influx of people is going to increase our call volume significantly. Again, the numbers that I told you about January 2021 to January of 2022 is a 30% increase. And we only foresee that changing or continuing to grow as we grow closer to the time that the factory is open and families are moving in and people are commuting back and forth to work. We cover the largest amount of interstate in the county as far as EMS agencies go. So even those folks who don't move into the county and are commuting will more than likely be passing through our service area. So we do anticipate a significant increase in call volume, bearing that in mind.
The increase in call volume we had this last year, do you attribute that to COVID or just?
No, not really. Even from 2019 to 2020, we saw, about 110 calls, and that's been consistent each year as we went forward. I tried to go back and look in our historical data, but the state has taken that server offline to transition it to the charting system that we use now, so I wasn't able to compile that data for this report. But we've seen consistently the same, increase year to year. So we anticipate probably that being threefold, considering the opening of the factory and the folks that will come with it.
Does anybody else have anything?
I just thank you for everything that you're doing and pass that along to everyone else.
We will do it. Thank you all.
Led
Thank
Moses
you.
came a really long way.
If I can ask one thing before Cody leaves, you had a special request that you sent to some of us over the weekend. Would you like to ask the board about that tonight? Or if they would like, they can refer it to the committee for further consideration.
Does it cost money? Cost
I
money,
don't-
it's not on the agenda.
I don't think it does.
That was a surprise for a
Sort of.
specific person.
So it might not
It's
be,
not a secret, but it might kind of,
yeah, we
would
might
blow
not
the
want to talk about it
surprise.
in public forum right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd rather wait till committee, if that's
yeah,
possible.
because it's a really great idea for a really special
Yeah.
person, so. yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Cody.
Thanks, Cody.
Next item on the agenda is the sheriff's office. Sheriff Foster.
I had a request. I had reached out, board members, to Stephen a few days ago about, I'm pretty much running out of overtime money. Due to the COVID situation, in light of that, and also the ECOs, the TDOs, everything else we're having to deal with and spend time on, which is somewhere upwards sometimes of 30 to 40 hours, I'm running out of money. And I initially asked him to maybe amend and appropriate about $50,000 to cover me to the end of the year. I've looked at it, and I think that number's gonna be more like about $100,000. I'm averaging about $20,000 per month to get me through the next budget year. So, that would be my request to you, if you could amend and appropriate that, maybe possibly from the PAF to carry me through the budget year.
The PAF has had a good year this year, so don't see any issues with it. So you want to up it from the 40,000 in your letter to 100,000?
Yes, sir. I believe if I would not do myself due diligence, if I did that, I'd be back within 2 months asking you for more. So the way I've got it calculated, it would take, I'm figuring anywhere from 80 to 100 to make it happen. Anything that's left, of course, would go back. It wouldn't be spent, would be placed back in there, just to get me through this
The
budget.
letter that's in my packet is 19. So, I mean, I don't have a problem with going up, but it says 19.
Well, actually, the letter says 19 is what they got from DMV, but they're requesting 40,000, I think, on the next line
Okay, I
to
got
be
it.
amended and appropriated.
Gotcha.
But that was a DMV money that they had just received.
The agency averages around 500+ hours of overtime every month. And by doing the math, it would take at least 100 to make that happen.
So that's what you want is 100?
Yes, sir. If it
So
be.
moved.
Second.
Have a motion to amend and appropriate $100,000 from the PAF account into 31021-413300. Is there any questions or discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Cook?
Aye.
I'll abstain.
Abstain.
Aye.
So approved. Anything else on that, Sheriff?
No, sir, I really appreciate it. Like I said, it's gonna take that to get me through the end of the year. And hopefully it won't take that much, but I believe it's gonna be pretty close to that. So,
Question, because I've brought it up before, and of course, I'm conflicted from voting on the money part, but the TDO issue not improved since our last discussion.
praying for a lot of house bills, but it's not getting any better whatsoever. We've had one, like I said, here just the other night, TDO run out, or the ECO, now we're waiting for the TDO. Officer leaves the hospital, within 10 minutes, he's returning back. They magically come up with that, so now we're back sitting with this guy again, excess of 30+ hours. So, a lot of legislation up. I hope one of these several House bills they got up will pass this year. We're gonna have to get some relief somewhere.
Well, and I'm gonna get up on the soapbox for a minute. I've said this before, but, you know, they haven't fixed the TDO issue, but we all received an invitation to groundbreaking for a facility. They're adding another facility for juveniles, but they've yet to fix the TDO issue for adults. But I guess we'll discuss that next month.
I think they're also having some trouble with Steadfast as well. Their employee clientele is not what it used to be, so now they don't have the people to sit with them or to transport. So there again, it falls back on the locality.
So when that-
Imagine that.
So when that happens, that you lose an officer, it's on duty.
Yeah, he's virtually there 3, 4, 5 days, whatever it takes. Just whenever they decide they wanna come up with a placement for him, I reckon.
And you know, my problem with that is you're talking about, you know, a segment of our population that's probably experiencing the worst time in their life, and they're sticking them in a hospital room. I know y'all have heard this before, for 16, 18, 24, 36 hours. And it's not fair to these citizens. I mean, to me, it's almost criminal. You know, a lot of times they come asking for help, and that's how they get treated.
So is all this falling under the Mount Rogers Community Service? Is that what
You
it's
know,
falling under?
parts of it, and then a lot of it's just, again, faulty legislation. The ball's been dropped somewhere in the last 6 to 8 years. I don't know where it fell, but, you know, the chairman's right. You know, a lot of these people, if they've got a drug addiction or they're on a high from some type of narcotic and they're placed there for that long and they're coming down, by the time they come down, a lot of times they don't even know what they were taking there in the first place.
Right.
So, I mean, it's not a good situation for them. It's really not. I think we're not really helping them in that manner, and we're hurting them more than we're doing anything, so.
While we're on legislation there, there's also a bill to fund the rest of the deputy positions that are supposed to be filled to meet the formula, which would mean one additional position for Wythe County. Some localities are looking at 10 or so in the process, but with our population, it should be one additional one. It's still out there pending right now, so we're sending in support letters on it just to try to get our additional one deputy that the state should be funding.
And not to get your hope up, we've been asking for that deputy for 20 years. We've yet to get it. I hope we get it. Like I said, some things is changing, but,
Not like they're not sitting on $2.6 billion surplus, is it?
the surplus, yeah.
Billion, in case the microphone didn't pick that B up.
So will that new legislation cover the ones that we're funding?
The legislation just adds one on the formula. So it could cover one of the 6 that we picked up that's been covered by PAF for years, and then the county's covered for the last 3 years, so.
Okay.
And also, I've got some representatives here tonight with us from True Blue Photo Speed Enforcement Program. I invited some of the board members, and Mr. Smith was there, Mr. Hankins and Mr. Baird came in that day, and some more was coming. I think some people got sick or whatnot, but these are, legislation was passed last year of placing photo speed enhancement cameras in school zones and work zones within the Commonwealth of Virginia. And the code sections are there. I left some books here near the chairman's desk the other day. Like I said, the representatives are here tonight if you need to take a look at those as to what we could do with a program like that. When they first come and talked to me about it, I had some reservations about it. But the more they talked to me about the program, there was a lot of things that I liked. Stationary radar anymore is like a thing of the past. Dealing with the ECOs, TDOs, the volume of service calls and everything that we have to deal with, it's hard for me to put a man like in a school zone every morning. So after we contacted this company and they went to some of the VACOR meetings, they elected to come down here and do a speed study just to see where our problem areas were. And the Jackson school zone, the Fort Chiswell school zone, we've got some very severe problems. I'll let them elaborate on that when they come up. And of course, Route 11 in front of Roaring Tree Elementary School, we have a problem there. And the problem just enhances when the interstate is closed down or they have a wreck, because everything is routed in one of those 2 directions. So most people at that point are going to be trying their best to make up for lost time. So they're going to be flying through our school zones and whatnot when the interstate's blocked. But the biggest thing that I liked, and they can elaborate on it more, is these cameras that they can put up are called license plate readers. And what they do, they will pretty much show me as a law enforcement officer the vehicles that enter that school and the tag numbers on those vehicles daily. And Lord forbid we would ever have a child who was kidnapped, abducted, or taken against their will. I've got a really good place to start. I've got the color of that vehicle. I've got a tag number, something that in years past that I would not have had. And I'm glad we've never been faced with that situation here, but it could happen tomorrow. So I'll let them elaborate on that. I won't take up their time, but they can elaborate more on that because I do believe they're next on the agenda. The only thing that the statute says that if you adopt this, we have to have a county ordinance on it, much like we do the speed enforcement, which falls under the 92.1. So you would have to adopt that if you would find yourselves to be in favor of that. And like I said, I won't tie up their time because I know they want to speak to you about it if you don't have any more questions for me.
Gentlemen?
Good evening. My name is Mark Hutchinson, and I'm the founder and owner of a company called Blue Line Solutions based out of Chattanooga, Tennessee. You might be familiar with Johnson County, Tennessee, over Mountain City. That's where I grew up, and I was chief deputy over there in Johnson County for a number of years. After I left East Tennessee, I went to the governor's office in Tennessee as a law enforcement liaison before going to the governor's office in Georgia as a law enforcement law enforcement coordinator, and then came back to the governor's office as a law enforcement administrator. So many of my years that were in public service were either dealing with administration or traffic. And traffic is where I found my calling. When I was 19, I'd put a badge on as a young deputy sheriff, and the first fatality that I worked was a 10-year-old. His name was Matthew, and I'll take his memory with me to the grave. But to make a long story short, his father was .32 with a blood alcohol level. He hit a dump truck head on, and Matthew wasn't wearing a seatbelt, and his little body was destroyed. But I worked on Matthew medically, trying to wait for the paramedics to get there to keep him alive long enough for them to get there and help him, but he didn't make it. I realized that day that traffic enforcement is the only proactive thing that a police officer can do. I was reacting to burglaries, reacting to crashes, reacting to every call that was coming in.
but I realized that I could get out and do traffic enforcement and stop the dying before it happens. And that's where my passion for traffic safety came from. And, 30 years later, I'm still doing it. I started this company in 2010, and as the sheriff said last year, the legislation made it available to work here in Virginia. Now, what we do is very different from any other company that you will ever hear about, because quite honestly, every other company out there wants to write tickets and cash checks, and that's just as clear as I can make it. It's a money grab. It's a cash grab. That's what we hear, right? Well, we are very different, and the difference is that we are safety focused. Our entire goal is to drive down the numbers of speeders in school zones, and when we do that, we reduce the amount of tickets that are written. We reduce the amount of citations that are written. And we do that through a program that I developed. And going back to the highway safety days, it was my job in 2000, working with the governor's office in Tennessee, to implement a program you might have heard of called Click It or Ticket. And it was my job to get law enforcement to roll that out across the state and to get involved. Now, what we did in Click It or Ticket was we started out with seatbelt surveys, and that was just hundreds of people sitting out on roadways across the state watching people drive by and marking down whether they were wearing a seatbelt or not, because we had to have a baseline to know what the usage rate was. So once we had that usage rate, then you started seeing Click It or Ticket brochures show up at health departments. Click It or Ticket brochures brought to the sheriff's departments and the police departments to share with the community. Seatbelts are important. And of course, you all have seen Click It or Ticket banners on fences and public buildings and so forth. All of that stuff is public information and education. And that was designed to bring awareness that seatbelts are save lives and encouraging people to wear them. Following that, you started to see seatbelt commercials, Click It or Ticket commercials on TV, more public information and education. But that was also a warning. Law enforcement's going to be out in 2 weeks, Click It or Ticket, right? So following the commercials, you always see cops out doing the enforcement. And so that's the enforcement arm, followed by more seatbelt surveys to see if the seatbelt usage rate increased. So that program is 22 years old now. It's very successful, created by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, funded by the Department of, I just lost it, the Federal Highway Administration. So what I did was I took that program and modeled this program after it. So the first thing that we do is surveys, speed surveys in the school zones to see if there is a problem, and if there is a problem, to what degree there's a problem. The second thing is we share that information with the community. We develop a partnership with the school system to send that information to the parents through their email portals. And we do that as well through the social media of the school, as well as the social media and press releases from the sheriff's office. And following that, then we go into a 30-day warning period. So the messaging the second time through those same avenues would be, parents, this program's going to start with a 30-day warning period on such and such day. And for those next 30 days, anybody that speeds at 10 and above the speed limit, so we're already giving them 10 above the school zone speed limit, would only receive a warning ticket. So in the first week of that warning phase, we do another speed survey to measure the effectiveness of the public information education. Then after those 30 days, when it starts into an enforcement, we do another 5-day survey to measure the effectiveness of the 30-day warning period. And I want to show you some data and the benefits of this program. But up to that point, not one ticket has been written. And we will see a 60+% reduction in speeding through school zones without writing the first ticket. And that's what the program is about. And then in week 5 of the enforcement, we do another survey to measure, what the enforcement has done. So what I'd like to do is start with your speed data. We handed out, or the county administrator handed out some data a few minutes ago, and it starts with Jackson Memorial Elementary School. Now, these were 5-day surveys, and it's done by putting a little square box on a pole out there, and it just collects speed data. That's all it does. And it was out there from 7:30, well, it was out there for 5 days, but the data is collected from 7:30 a.m. to 9 a.m., so that's when the flashers would flash in the morning, 9 a.m. to 2:30 p.m., which is through the daytime when the speed limit goes back up, and then again 2:30 in the afternoon to 4 p.m. when the flashers would flash again. And you can see in Jackson Memorial Elementary School, the bottom right-hand red number, 1,012 violations in 5 days at 10 and above the speed limit. Now, the traffic count was 5,155. So that's quite a high percentage. So you multiply that by 4 weeks, this school zone has 4,000 vehicles per month driving through this school zone while children are present at 10 and above the speed limit. You can flip to the next page, and you can see that little pie graph that 449 were going 11 to 14 over, but 362 were going 15 to 20 over, and 201 were going over 21 miles and above. So as you look at these, I'm not going to do this on each one of those speed studies. I just wanted you to see how they read. But you can see the problem there. Let's move over to Speedwell Elementary. Not quite such a significant problem there as with Jackson. 2,710 vehicle count, 287 violations, so it's about 1,000 a month. And let's go over to Rural Retreat Elementary School. Vehicle count 8,299 and 1,716 violations. So again, you're approaching, 9,000, or I'm sorry, about 5,000 violations in that month. Then we go to Fort Chisel, and of course this is the one that the sheriff brought up. 2,656 speeding violations, and all of these are at 10 and above the speed limit. So it's 9,000 violations, approaching 10,000 in a given month. And then we also did some data out there on the interstate, because the law does allow the enforcement of construction zones. You see, this was on Interstate 77. The first speed study you see with Virginia, Interstate 77 in the yellow. This was a 24-hour period, so you have 37,380 violations. So over 120,000 violations a month. And in the same area was broken down 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and it showed 20,000 violations. So the first thing that we do is there a problem? And if I ask you to answer that question, I think most people would say, yeah, there's a problem. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And that's what we want to change. So our program costs absolutely nothing to the county. We provide the equipment, the infrastructure, everything. And the way that it works is once we enter into a contract with the county, we would put the cameras up in the school zones. And the public information would be like this. Parents, do you realize that 9,000 vehicles in your child's school zone are traveling through there at 10 and above the speed limit every month? This program is designed to alleviate that. The last study that you see is actually from Georgia, and it came out today. Let's see. Is it back there? Oh, I've got it here. So I just wanted to share with you, because it's got 9 school zones, and to look at the reduction that we've seen. I'll ask you just to flip over to page You know, on page 3, you can see when everything started. So this program started in August of last year, and the data goes through today. But if you go to page 4, you can see the individual school zones. And I'm just going to start with Appalachia High, which is the top left corner, pre-program. Had 1,190 violations at 10 and above the speed limit. During the PI&E phase, it dropped to 189 without writing the first ticket, just through public education. In the warning phase, it dropped to 108, and then during the enforcement, it dropped to 78. So that's when tickets were starting to be written, at 78. And in post-enforcement, that's into week 5, it's down to 46 a week from 1,190. Now, is that a success? Absolutely. Is it a money grab? No, because only 49 people out of 1,190 in the beginning were receiving tickets. So that's the way the study reads. So you can see down at the bottom that we've had a 57% reduction in this county during the public information education, another 21% during the warning period, another 10% during the enforcement period, and another 4% in the post-enforcement, for a total of 92% reduction throughout the county in school zones of speeding vehicles. So that's really our approach. And we measure the data just like you see here in these programs, not only throughout the first 4 weeks, but throughout the first 2 years. Because we want to be able to bring this data back to you to show you and the community how the program is doing. As I said, there's no cost to the county, and I will say, without spending much more time, that an officer from the sheriff's office has to validate and has to approve any citation that goes out. Our company does not believe that we are the owners of this program. The county is the owner of this program, and we will do nothing without the approval of the sheriff's office or the county administrator. So what kind of questions may I be able to answer?
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Hutchinson?
So what's the cost? You said there's no cost, but there is a cost,
Okay.
because we have to have a deputy out there certifying that stuff, so we're paying a deputy, so there is a cost.
Okay, so that's a good question. There's 3 different types of technology. In the school zone, those would be stationary cameras. It doesn't require an officer. The only thing that the officer has to do is approve them. So there would be some hours in that, but it literally takes about 1 second to 2 seconds to approve a citation. Basically, that officer is just looking at 4 pictures of the vehicle and the registration that we have already processed for them. And does it match? And if it does match, is that a citation they want to issue? Now, if they see it's an undercover car or something of that nature, they may want to kick it out, right? Because we wouldn't have known that during processing. So they have the ultimate approval to decline them. So from that standpoint, there's manpower, very minimal, but there is. If an officer uses a handheld device, say out on the interstate, we have a overtime program that is exactly like the DMV's highway safety grants received by the sheriff's office. And that is that the program will reimburse the county 100% for the hours the officers are out there using it. So that gives the sheriff's office more bodies out there in a patrol car at no cost to the county while the program is underway. Now, there is, the way the company makes money is, let me first say that the Virginia law does not allow a revenue share of any kind. Okay, so that's not the way that this is done. The statute says that the fine can be set up to $100. So when we process the citation, let me just go through the process very quickly. When the image comes in from the camera, the violation comes in from the camera, we use inlets, which is hosted by the FBI as part of NCIC. We are vetted by the FBI, and all of our people go through background checks and all those things to be able to run that license plate on behalf of the sheriff's office. We get that information back. We're looking at the images of the vehicle. We're looking at the registration. If they don't match for some reason, we throw it out. Let's say there's a pickup truck pulling a lawnmower trailer and you can't see the tag because of the lawnmower, we throw it out. If it's, any of those situations, we kind of cull the garbage out of. But once those are approved, let's say if there were 50 violations in this batch and we throw 5 out and there's 45 that come to an officer of the sheriff's office for approval. And then he starts going through them, and for whatever reason, he may spoil 5. Let's just, for this scenario. So out of 50, there may be 40 ready to process or actually turn into citations. We will mail those out on behalf of the agents of the county, of the sheriff's office, and we will even take the collection of the fines on behalf of the county, so you don't have to hire people to do that. On the 15th of every month, you'll receive a revenue check for the paid citations for all the fine dollars. Now, where we make our money is there's a $15 processing fee for each citation, but that money comes off of the paid fines. So the county will never write a check. The county will never be invoiced. And in another county, there was a question came up, and I'll address it just in case it's on somebody's mind here, because it's becoming a common question. What if people don't pay their fines and the processing fees outweigh what's collected? Well, the answer is those dollars would roll forward to the next month. But let's say, for instance, the county just decides to cancel the program and it's upside down. You will never still receive an invoice from the company. There will never be a cost to the company. We would eat that. I'm the owner of the company, and I put that in writing to the sheriff in a letter, and we can put that in the contract. So there's literally zero, or very close to zero risk for the county.
So it won't require the sheriff to hire anybody? I mean, you'll be able to do it with what you got?
No. Yes, it doesn't require any manpower, other than just approving the citations.
Does anybody else have any questions for Mr. Hutchinson?
On the paper, y'all did just like the school zones during a certain time.
Yes, sir.
Is that the only time it would ticket, or will it ticket 24 hours?
That's actually, I think, up to the sheriff. We did the surveys based on, we have the data for 24 hours because it collected it.
I understand
Right.
what you gave us and why you
Right.
gave it to us.
I don't think that that's been determined yet. I think that would be a determination from maybe the board and the sheriff. We're fine with whatever you decide to do.
From that, I think the statute says it's when school is actively in session, so it'd be like Monday through Friday, during the time that it's in session, and we always delay a day of processing in case you have a bomb threat, a water main break, early dismissal for teacher workday. That allows an agency time to send us an email and says you do not need to process anything during this time frame. So it's set up specifically by code, it's when school's active school is in and there's children or interaction, bus traffic, panic traffic, anything like that.
If there are football games or things like that at night, that's really up to you on how that's handled.
And what is the citation?
The law says that it can be no more than $100. And going back to what the sheriff said before he left up here is, if the officer writes a citation in school zone, it's much more than that. But this statute doesn't set the citation. It says it can be no more than $100. So that would be set by ordinance.
And on that, sir, would be, it's a civil fine. It's not reported to the Division of Motor Vehicles for effect on your driving record. It's not reported to your insurance company because of an increase in that. Unless you're just a good Samaritan, it's way on your conscience, you want to go report yourself. So, that's one of the key benefits of it being on the civil side of the forfeiture. It does not affect the driver's license like actually getting actual summons from a law enforcement officer.
Okay, so we would set the cost of the ticket.
Yes, sir.
That's in ordinance.
Yes, sir.
And do we have you thought about what it should be? Sheriff?
the 15 minus 100, what he wants to operate the program. Basically, it's gonna be about $85.
We found, well, the fine would be $100, right? And if that's what you're asking, if that's what the board so chooses. And we find that, you know, even through the click it or ticket model and booze it and lose it and those national programs, it's always been the recommendation of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration to make the fine steep enough to where it modifies driving behavior. But the advantage to this is that if an officer had written a ticket, it might have been $180, $200 or whatever, went against your driver's license and insurance. This way, it doesn't go against either of those, and it's much cheaper. So it's still enough to modify driving behavior, but it's not, it doesn't penalize the person as much.
So what we're saying is $100 fine?
Yes, sir, unless we would have an officer there running it, we could supersede it and
Right.
bring to that and write it first.
But the citation, we want it to be $100.
Yes, correct.
Yes, sir.
Pay attention, Jamie.
I was here for the original. I think the one thing that I like is the tag readers. I think it's a big part for me, especially for the schools next to the interstate. All schools are important, but when you got this traffic coming through, you don't know who's coming up and down the road. I mean, you got these schools, the one over at Jackson's out by itself, you know, it's kind of remote, as well as Speedwell, so,
Yeah,
you know.
but Jackson's right at the interstate, I mean,
Right, so that's one good thing that we would have for us there.
And,
Well, they're trying to beat the light.
Yeah, so, and I've already told everybody I'll set up a different savings account so I can pay my tickets out of.
I'm glad you brought that up, sir. The program does provide one ALPR camera per one school zone camera. And in Barrow County, where this study, I just read this study from, we've solved 3 crimes in those school zones just since August through those cameras. And one of them
Camera
was,
shoots both directions?
yes, sir. And one of them was a drive-by shooting, so it was a serious violation.
Man, Nobody else have any questions?
I do. And, what we got pulled up here on paragraph 3, it was talking about the, county would not pay for equipment required signage, but would also not receive any proceeds from civil penalties, and the company's equipment investment was paid.
Okay, so that's I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a normal question as well. So that is, I'm not exactly sure how that's worded, but in the contract, it will say that the company requests at least a 24-month period to recoup our cost of the infrastructure. Okay? And what that's referring to is if, let's say in month 2, we put $300,000, $400,000 out in infrastructure, and the county comes back in month 2 and says, we just want to do away with this, that then the county would, you know, reimburse us for those dollars. But that's the only time that would ever, in fact, that's never happened in my experience. But that's a way for us to try to protect the company from, you know, mass loss.
So no cost to the county unless they were to break the contract?
That's right. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
And is that paid for out of your 15 processing, or is that?
Actually, that's out of our pocket in the infrastructure long before the program's ever even started. So it's real cost to the company.
So to clarify, it could be as much as 24 months from, if we decided to do it tomorrow, it could be as much as 24 months before we'd ever see any proceeds.
Oh, no, sir. It'd be month 1.
In month 1? Okay.
Yes. You know, basically what this says, and again, I'm not sure how the book reads.
Right.
We need to change it to mirror the contract if it doesn't. But the contract reads that Blue Line recoups 1/24 of our infrastructure costs per month from our proceeds, right? And that's how it's prorated. And but we never take anything out of your revenue, And you don't have to wait. In fact, on the 15th of month 2, because you started month 1, on the 15th of month 2, you would receive a revenue check for month 1 receivables. And you'll also receive a revenue report that can be provided to all the council and the county administrator that breaks down all the numbers as to how many violations, how many were paid, not paid, and so forth.
So if we wanted additional plate readers for schools that you didn't do the study on, what would be the cost to the county for that?
If there are more school systems that we put cameras in, the school zone cameras, they wouldn't cost anything. But let's say the sheriff wanted 15 other cameras for whatever, they're $3,000 a year per camera. And that would be a cost if you just wanted to purchase some others.
So I know we talked about Road Tree High School and Max Meadows Elementary. Especially Max Meadows Elementary is redesigning that school zone to where it captures Pepsi Ferry versus the actual road it's on, just for the safety of that school. And I know we'll probably have to have VDOT involved with that.
Yes, sir. Oh, yeah, there's also in the contract a mechanism that allows the county to purchase stuff through our company without the money having to come into the county. In other words, let's say if the company owed the county $100,000 for a month or whatever, and the county wanted to purchase services like ALPR cameras, and say it was going to be $30,000 that month, that $30,000 could be taken out of the revenue, and the city or the county would receive a check for $70,000. So to make it easier, to where there wouldn't be any further purchases, or encumbrances by the county. So it's.
There will be a camera at every school in the county, or just the ones that were listed here?
Well, again, that's up to you and the sheriff, but what we generally do, if we look at the data, for instance, there was one there that the numbers were pretty low on, 287 at Speedwell. So we might look at that one, a 90% reduction, would have about 100 violations a month, right? So one of the things that we provide as part of this program as well at no cost, the radar speed signs that show you your speed as you're driving toward them. So the law says that you have to have a sign within 1,000 feet from the enforcement zone. So then after that, we suggest that we put this radar sign that shows people how fast they're going, and then the flashers to the school zone, right? So that's 3 warnings before they get into the school zone. But for these that have really low numbers that really don't have much of a problem, it might be that we just give you one of those radar signs and put that in those school zones, which still make people more aware of the speeds and will drive those numbers down a little bit more. That's still no cost to the county. Those cost about $3,000 for us is what we pay for them. We generally use solar, so you don't have to run AC out there. So that's what we would do, or that's what we would suggest in those schools that don't have a problem.
Do those take pictures of license plates?
They don't, but we could put, the ALPR cameras in those. That would be not a problem at all, if that's what the county
The
wants.
sheriff's talking about somebody getting kidnapped,
That's right.
I would think we would need one of those at every school.
Well, one of the big things about ALPR readers in this day and time, and it's unfortunate, but the child sex offender registry can be put into the system, and if a child sex offender is coming into the school zone at recess 2 or 3 times a week, the sheriff can be notified. I mean, that's the kind of, things that you can keep from happening. It's about, at that point, again, proactive law enforcement to try to stop bad things from happening before they do. And all at no cost.
But you said it's 1 reader per school?
It would be 2. Are all of these, Sheriff, 2 lanes? Okay, so they're all 2 lanes, which would be 1 camera on each side. So there would be 1 ALPR camera for each side as well.
And that's, you know, that's part of the discussion we have to work on, and, you know, establish an order to create this, and then establishing which schools which zones you put it in. So, you know, do you do all schools? You know, Buck Street's already a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit down through there. You got a school zone that's a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. Within the town of Royal Tree, within the town of Wytheville, are there advantages? But that would be something you all would need to look at and decide and work with the school system on where we want to implement these cameras.
And if there are more schools that you would like for us to address, we would do speed studies in those. I do know that almost all the cities in the county are interested, and all the towns in the county are interested in this program.
Well, the reason for my question was, like in Speedwell, you've got the one road, and then you've got the other 21, and they're both listed as school zones.
Okay, in that case, if there are 2 roads, 2 cameras and 2 cameras, it'd be 4 ALPR cameras. And if you didn't want to use all 4 of those in the school zone, 2 of those could be put somewhere else in the county.
And I would say a lot of schools are like that. I'll have to conflict out of voting on this, but just a general question. Like Spiller, you know, 4th Street is technically a school zone, I believe. So I guess we would just kind of figure out like the.
Absolutely do any good there at all. We talked about
Yeah.
that, and I asked Mr. Hawkins to go and take a look at that.
Yeah, I mean,
You got
on a
some
safety
children,
standpoint, it,
These here in the town of Whitfield, I don't think for speed would be enough.
yeah, I agree, I agree.
And one thing that we encountered through different counties is a lot of county school zones are set up different.
Mhm.
And the county of Virginia specifically lays out how the school zone is to be implemented. So we've actually run into places where the actual school zone needs correction. So at that point in time, when we're talking to the school superintendent and to the VDOT, see if appropriate corrections can be made, just to meet what the statute says it has to be.
Gotcha.
So like Sheffey, probably you don't have a speeding problem at Sheffey, but it's still, you can still have a kid get snatched from Sheffey. So I
That's
mean,
right.
We would need to do, I would think we need to do something at Sheffey. I mean, it's not in any town, you know.
Sheriff, you have anything else to
Yeah, I might
add?
be able
I'm
to
sorry.
elaborate on that some more. Monies that may be received from the program, what my thought has been on it is to invest it back in the children. The board was nice enough several years ago to give us SRO vehicles, which we're in really good shape on. Those things are probably gonna last at least 6 to 8 years probably, the way the guys are maintaining them. But on down the road, putting more of the LPR cameras out with the monies that could be made from the program. Maybe funding some of the vehicle costs with the SRO program. Or even if it took off like I'm hoping it might, maybe even going back and look at some of the positions that the board is helping us fund. So there's a lot of different things we could use that for, basically by putting it back into the school system where it's elaborating, where it's starting at. So, Dr. Poole, I failed to mention when I first come up, before I introduced these gentlemen, we did have Dr. Poole here. He was here for the meeting as well, and gave a lot of input to them too. I forgot to mention his name. He could tweak these school zones and these times. That's why I wanted him here too, to hear it. He sounded like he was a big proponent of it. He was, you know, anything that would keep kids safe, it seemed like he was all for that. So, not speaking on his behalf, but that was sort of the inkling that I got when he went. So, but I'd like to take it and turn it and put it back into where it's setting now, is to help the safety of the children. That's my biggest priority. I don't want any of the kids to get hurt. When they close interstates down, we've got that flowing through here, you just never know. I thought it could coincide as well with that walkway, or, you know, that we're going to try to speak with VDOT about. That's something that's been needed down there at Fort Chisholm for years. And those two could coincide and work together with one another. We definitely would erect them there, because we know that's a problem by the statistics that you have.
They try to run that, they try to beat that light,
Yeah, every time.
I mean, they fly through there.
But, that's what I would look at maybe doing with part of the finances from it. If y'all have any more questions for me, I'll be glad to answer.
Does anybody have any questions for the sheriff, or Mr. Hutchinson, Mr. Hodgson, who refused to come up?
I failed to introduce him. Most of you probably know him. retired 25-year law enforcement officer from Washington County in Bristol, Virginia, Greg Hodgson. And I failed to also mention how much I appreciate you allowing us the time to stand before you and talk to you about this program. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Bear, what's,
Well, yeah, Mr. Hankins has been working on this, and you see at the bottom of the letter there, basically there are the steps to implement this. We typically don't bring vendors in, but this was a good opportunity to bring a vendor in to explain the entire process to you of what we're looking at. Basically, the thing I would recommend is that you all make a motion requesting the county attorney to draft an ordinance for the implementation of this and establishment of the fine. If you want to start at the $100 fine, we can put that in the ordinance for drafting purposes, and then when you hold the public hearing on it, you could always come down from there if you wanted to, but that would be at the top of the thing. They can start working on the ordinance, and then he's got the additional things there. We need to procure the vendor. Obviously, these gentlemen have a very strong case of that. Enter it into the contract and then start the operation. But the first step would be make a motion to authorize the county attorney to draft an ordinance for you all to review and establishing a fine amount.
So moved.
Second.
And amount,
$100.
I got a motion by Mr. Smith, and I believe a second by Mr. Cook. Is there any questions or discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Terry? I'll abstain.
Abstain.
So approved. One thing on the procuring a vendor, do we need to take action on that now?
they have requested sole source. Mr. Hankins has shared that with Mr. Martin. I would request that county attorney review that to see if they deem that meets the sole source requirement, if you all so deem.
So do we need,
I mean, I think you can just ask them to review that. I don't know if he's had a chance to fully review it yet or not.
We'd like a little more time, make sure.
and I know I'm conflicted out of voting on it, but if we go to procure a vendor, whether it's sole source, I think a big piece of it, and I think what I heard was the education piece. You know, whatever vendor, like I said, I know I'm conflicted out, but whatever vendor, I think
Well,
there needs to be a substantial education piece to whatever their proposal is.
and it wouldn't take long at all. We could put the advertisement out immediately within 10 days, get the proposals back in, interview firms, and have a recommendation coming to you all to do it.
So is there anything else on that matter?
Don't know of anything else, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you,
you
Mr.
all.
Hutchins.
Thank you all.
Grady. Next item on the agenda is the vacation of a right-of-way request. Mr. Barrett.
Yes, Ms. Castle from the Planning Commission has received a request from Mr. Bilbrey and Max Meadows Ruleton Club to vacate another right-of-way behind the Max Meadows building. I would request that you all authorize staff to proceed with the process and have the county attorney draft an ordinance for the vacation of this right-of-way.
Is there, when you look at the drawing, it shows First Street comes down in front of it. I got paved, let's see, what page are we on here? Well, right after.
Yes, sir.
Right after the letter there, it's highlighted in yellow.
Yes, sir.
And I'm not familiar with the area. Is that a road or an alleyway or anything?
If you look at the second page underneath there, the yellow block is the area that is proposed to be vacated. And to the left of that is, you'll see that it's treed area between the Presbyterian Church property and the Price Carolyn property. It is an undeveloped right-of-way like most of what Max Meadows is. They are just asking for that section in yellow there to be vacated. That's all.
The dark section past it is that still, do we have that right away through?
That is still a right-of-way, and what we will be doing is notifying all of the landowners, the Hassans and the Phipps, out through there, and then AEP owns the land at the very end of it. We will be notifying them that this is the proposal to vacate this part of that old road. That way, they have an opportunity to come and voice their opinion to you all if they don't want it closed, or if they have no objection to it being closed.
So, but if we approve this, is that right away landlocked then, or do we have landlocked?
Actually, if you'll go back to the other map, you will see that there's the right-of-way that continues there along the railroad tracks.
Okay,
That appears, it's called Bentwood Avenue that runs through there. And the other residents may come forward and want to request vacation of the rest of that right-of-way.
okay.
So what are you asking for, Mr. Barry?
Just authorization to proceed with an advertisement of the proposed vacation of right-of-way and to draft an ordinance.
Entertain a motion to authorize the advertisement to vacate the right-of-way.
So moved.
Have a motion by Mr. Smith. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second by Mr. Terry. Is there any more discussion or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So approved. Is that it on the right-of-way, Mr. Barry?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that's all.
Next item is the wastewater budget amendments.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, first of all, you all talked at the last meeting, y'all remember Mr. Wright was here, we talked about the $1.2 million for the 0% loan for the sanitary sewer evaluation. We would request you all amend $200,000 for our engineering services that's coming out of that funding amount. We will have the rest of the project budgeted in next year's budget for the construction phase of it. So I would request a motion for $200,000 amended and appropriated into the sanitary sewer project.
Entertain a motion to amend and appropriate $200,000 for the Max Meadows sanitary sewer project engineering.
So moved.
Have a motion by Mr. Cook. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second by Mr. Smith. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Cook?
Aye.
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 So approved.
Next, Lot 24 sewer project. As you know, we are extending the sewer line. We advertised for pipe to start getting the orders in for pipe because in this environment, the bids were everywhere from a little bit of pipe been on site to pipe been 26 weeks out. Would request that the board amend and appropriate $400,000 to 9060-470-519 for the Lot 24 sewer extension.
Entertain a motion to amend and appropriate $400,000 from reserves to create line item 9060-470519.
So moved.
Have a motion by Ms. Lawson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second by Mr. Terry, I believe. Is that you?
Yes, sir.
Is there any questions or discussion? Here none, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Terry?
Aye.
Aye. I'll abstain.
Aye.
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 So approved. Next item on the agenda is a 911 road name request. We have a memo from Ms. Lane requesting, is it off of Major Grahams Road?
Yes, it is.
To approve the name of Martha Bell Isle for this road. Martha Bell was the name of the wife of Major Graham. Entertain a motion to approve that request.
So moved.
Have a motion by Mr. Smith. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second by Mr. Horny. Is there any questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations, Martha Bell Isle. Next item on the agenda is the Lot 24 plat. Mr. Barry?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Lot 24, as I've shown you on the maps and everything before, has always just been a design. This is a plat that finalizes and creates that lot. As you will see, it's divided into a 24A and a 24B. I would request that the staff authorize us proceeding with recording this plat to establish these two lots.
Entertain a motion to authorize staff to proceed with creating lot 24A and lot 24B.
So moved.
Have a motion by Mr. Terry, do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second by Mr. Cook. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'll abstain.
No. So 6 ayes and Mr. Cook abstained. I mean, Mr. Smith abstained.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, add one additional handout item. While you're doing your amended appropriations, we are doing preliminary engineering report for the expansion of the Fort Chisholm wastewater treatment plant, and request you all amend and appropriate $50,000 for the preliminary engineering services for that.
So moved.
Have a motion to amend and appropriate $50,000 for the preliminary engineering planning as Mr. Bear described by Mr. Smith. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Mr. Terry. Is there any questions or discussion?
And I'll just add a comment on that. We, using that preliminary information report for that, we just submitted last Wednesday afternoon, an application to ARC for $700,000. We were expecting to be applying for $500,000. In our discussions over the last 2 weeks, we were able to up it. They were able to provide us an additional $200,000 for our application. So we are hoping to receive $700,000 towards that construction project. So.
Does that lead to any questions or discussion? Here now, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Cook?
Aye.
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 So approved.
Everyone's out of it tonight.
It feels like about 10 o'clock. Anything else under new business, Mr. Bear?
That's all I have. Thank you, sir.
Move to board reports. Mr. Terry?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One question, Mo Musser reached out to me late last week. He had received a grant for about $10,000, and he's not got it in his account. He's apparently requested the money, or it's hanging fire somewhere in somebody else's account. So can we try to help him fix that?
Yes, we can.
Thank you, sir. And that's all I've got, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Horny?
I don't have anything at this time.
Mr. Smith?
I've already talked to Mr. Bear about 2 roads, so I'm good, Mr. Chairman.
I hope they got
Just
that-
move on.
I hope they got that on video. Ms. Lawson?
I have nothing at this time.
Mr. Burnett?
I don't have anything at this time.
Mr. Cook?
I have nothing this time.
Yeah, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. No, I just will say we had a good trip to Richmond. We talked to, some delegates and senators about some deals. It was, very refreshing to be back up there after they were shut down here, so. Besides that, I don't have anything. I would entertain a motion to go into closed session under Virginia Code 2.2-3711A1, discussion of personnel matters, specifically dispatch and building inspection personnel.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Terry, have a second by Mr. Smith. Any questions or discussion? And now we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Terry?
Aye.
No.
Aye.
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 We are now in closed session. Have a motion to come out of closed session by Mr. Cook. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second by Mr. Smith. Do a roll call vote. Mr. Terry?
Aye.
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 Now in open session, Mr. Terry, if you'll read the certification.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Certification of closed meeting. Whereas the Wythe County Board of Supervisors has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. And whereas Section 2.2-3712 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the Wythe County Board of Supervisors that such a meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now therefore be it resolved that the Wythe County Board of Supervisors hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in this closed meeting to which this certification resolution applies, and only such public business matters as was identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the Wythe County Board of Supervisors. And I will make that a motion, Mr. Chairman.
Have a motion by Mr. Terry. Do we have a second?
Second.
Have a second by Ms. Lawson. Do a roll call vote. Mr. Cook?
Aye.
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 Anything else, Mr. Baird?
No, sir.
Mr. Hankins? Ms. Collins? Before we recess, I will say that, tonight they had the spelling bee. The school system did, and congratulations to Fort Chisholm Middle School, who was the winner of the spelling bee, so.
Awesome.
But, nothing else will be in recess until February the 10th, 2022 at 5:30
Mr. Chairman,
p.m. Oh,
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Will you add that'll be at the EOC Center so we can use the big screen down there?
at the EOC Center.
Thank you.